Today is about one of the most hidden and common causes of brain fog, irritability, anxiety, poor mood in general, trouble sleeping, anything that could do with brain and mental health. And it is constipation. And today is going to be a solo cast by me, Rachel. And as a clinician, I will tell you that most people who are constipated do not realize that they are constipated. And I think it's because we have kind of a different general definition of constipation that we use in society versus what really can count as constipation. So we're going to dive into that. We're going to dive into how people manage this and what you can do to actually test and see if this is part of your picture. And we're going to get into the nitty gritty of, what actually is an ideal bowel movement to be supporting your brain health and your body health. And we're going to jump into why would being constipated affect your brain so much. We're going to break it down. So let's dive in together.
Welcome to Mind Body Besties, your weekly reset with real talk, a little laughter, and the kind of honest conversations you'd have with your closest friend. I'm Katie, a therapist.
And I'm Rachel, a naturopathic doctor. We're here to share the personal stories, struggles, and wins that have shaped our own health and happiness. This isn't a lecture, it's a safe space to slow down, connect, and feel a little more human again. So grab your coffee, get cozy, and let's reset together. Okay, so why can constipation affect the brain? Our gut is responsible for clearing out our body's metabolic waste. If we're not doing that efficiently, we're actually getting recirculation of the toxins and the waste metabolites that our body has been trying so hard to get rid of. Toxins are like poison to our body. You're going to feel pretty terrible if someone poisoned you. If something is sitting in your gut longer than it's supposed to, our intestines are going to do their job. And what their job is to absorb what's sitting in our intestines. Think about it. You eat a hamburger and your intestines do this amazing job of absorbing all the nutrients from that hamburger that's just sitting in your intestines. It pulls it into your bloodstream, and then your body goes about its processes. So it can end up as cellular fuel. So if we're trying to get rid of things and our body is pulling it back into our bloodstream, it's like we're being exposed to it all over again. And the reason that we know that this is a thing, especially in the functional realm, is looking at people who are detoxing from mold. So interestingly, when someone's exposed to mold currently and they're living in mold or working in it every day, their blood levels of mold will rise, and we'll see that reflected in the testing that they do for urine or stool or however they're looking at. When they are out of the mold, say they've moved, say it's like 6 months later, if someone took a test then and we established that as their baseline level, and then they started taking supportive detox supplements and doing sauna and things like that, the levels of mold actually rise. So when someone is successfully detoxing, it looks as though there is more mold in the system because there is, in a way. It's not tucked away, it's actively back in the bloodstream. So our body is constantly dealing with dumping things like mold and other toxins through our liver into our gut to be excreted. And if that sits there for any amount of time, then a little bit is going to get reabsorbed. And the longer it sits, the more contact time we have. We're never going to be able to fully stop our intestines from doing their job of absorbing. So our greatest support we can do for our body is make sure that those things are actually moving out in a timely manner. Other reasons that constipation can affect the brain: estrogen recirculation. We actually have bacteria in our gut that puts estrogen back into our body and back into our bloodstream. And so the longer things sit, the higher estrogen levels that people have. And if you have a higher amount of estrogen to your progesterone, so higher estrogen to progesterone ratio, that actually increases inflammation and histamine in a lot of people. And that can cause issues that go way beyond what we consider just to be hormonal, because we're going into the territory of inflammation. Inflammation in general, there's a lot of inflammatory metabolites. There's a lot of cellular factory waste metabolites So remember, our body is made up of these trillions of cells, and each cell is like a little factory. So they're constantly trying to dump their metabolic waste, which is normal. That's our body's normal process. They dump it into the bloodstream. Our liver and our kidneys grab it and pull it out. And then our liver tries to dump it into our intestines so we can poop that right out and get rid of it. And if it sits there, then that's being absorbed right back. And that can make us tired, because not only are we going to feel tired from this inflammation and the toxins that are now affecting our system, but our body also has to spend extra cellular energy to go through and redo that process that it just did and dump it again and again and again. And then it keeps recirculating if we're not moving things out very well. We also have endotoxins, or LPS, lipopolysaccharide. This is the cell membranes of bacteria, and everyone has a little bit, but normally our immune system's not going to see a high amount of this unless we have stool and the different fiber and everything in the stool that's just sitting there feeding these bacteria and allowing them to reproduce, maybe even turn into a SIBO kind of picture where we have overgrowth of our normal bacteria. And we're going to get more of the LPS being seen by our immune system, more of that bacterial cell wall. And when that happens, unfortunately, our body usually mounts a really strong immune response because it thinks we have a big systemic infection. And that can make people feel terrible. Think about if you've had a UTI or a sinus infection. Having an infection doesn't feel good. The way our body responds to it is pretty aggressive and can make us feel really tired and awful. And again, think of times when you've had a cold or a flu or another infection. That's going to really affect your mental health. The inflammatory cytokines from that actually end up being inflammatory to our brain as well. And we are antisocial. We can't focus. It lowers our mood. Katie and I actually have a great previous episode on this, all about how infections actually affect our mental health, if you want to go listen to that. Our histamine burden can also be increased if we're not having good transit time for our stool. Histamine causes our body to get more flushed. A lot of times people notice it after they shower. We're more likely to be itchy. We're more likely to have brain fog, anxiety, fatigue, and sometimes this uneasy doom feeling that hits people, especially at night. Serotonin production, which happens in our gut, is also affected by constipation. So that's some direct mental health signaling. Think of how many mental health meds out there are affecting serotonin directly. That one's a really big one for how we feel. So overall, if we're not moving things out and we're disrupting our microbiome and we're reabsorbing all of these different toxins and things that we were trying to move out, we're going to get more inflammation and we're going to get more of this toxic burden in our bloodstream. And that's going to cause anxiety, insomnia. It can increase our aches and pains and body aches all over. It can cause headaches and migraines. The list goes on. And often one of the very first signs is just a little bit more fatigue, a little bit more brain fog, a little bit more anxiety or depression. It can be really subtle. Okay, so we clearly don't want this happening because we don't want to increase our toxic burden. So how can we tell if this is happening for us? And first, let's dive into what actually counts as constipation, because a lot of people don't realize that they are constipated. So basically anything less than 1 to 3 soft serve ice cream consistency bowel movements every single day means we're having some level of increased toxic burden to our system. So if we're going every other day, or if we're having firm stools and having to strain, then technically we are increasing our body's burden. And one of the tricky things is a lot of people think they alternate between constipation and diarrhea. And actually, most people who fit that, who would describe themselves as that, are actually constipated. And then their body is like, screw this, we don't want this extra toxic burden. And they are purging, it's pushing everything through. And so your body kind of self-purges every few days. So a lot of people with constipation, when they actually start softening their stool and doing things to actually treat their constipation, they don't have diarrhea anymore. And they were worried. They were scared to do these things to help with constipation because they thought it was going to worsen their loose stool. But a lot of times it actually ends up solving the problem and preventing the loose stool in the first place. Another thing that can be confusing for people is when we swing from loose stool all the way to the other side of the scale with really firm stool, we actually get small little rabbit pellets. So people can think that they're not constipated because they're having these tiny, tiny little bowel movements. But actually, that is a sign of really hard, really firm stool. Incomplete emptying is really common. So even if someone's having a daily bowel movement, sometimes we're not actually moving out yesterday's food. So we're not getting that 24-hour clearance that we want to make sure that we're not, increasing that toxic burden. Some people skip days. Some people constantly need to take laxatives. Some people have a backup of, extra bloating and stuff. And that's another sign that there's probably a little bit of slowed down transit. And even if someone is having, really firm stool, sometimes we are actually transiting in 24 hours. And so just a little bit of help to soften the stool is all we need. But other times, even if someone has a loose stool, if we're not moving out yesterday's material, we're still going to have the mental health effects. So I like to use the corn transit test. This is like a practical DIY test. It's a simple at-home way to estimate your transit time. And it can sound kind of confusing, the language, but fast transit time means loose stool. Slow transit time means constipation. So if we eat something like corn that we're not meant to 100% fully digest, so we're going to see it, or quinoa, we're going to see a little bit of the outside of the seed. If we eat something like that we can actually see, then you can actually eat that just one day of the whole week and then see when that comes out. And if you see it coming through later than 24 hours, then that's definitely not ideal. And so I recommend, if this is happening to you, working with a naturopathic doctor or someone who is truly integrative so they can help you with this in a safe way. A lot of over-the-counter laxatives or over-the-counter things have stuff in it that's actually not ideal to take long-term. If we take things to combat constipation every single day, a lot of them actually wear on your muscles over time, and you become dependent on it, and they actually can harm your own muscle tone in your intestines. So definitely work with someone. Some of my favorite treatments are magnesium citrate or oxide. These are our natural osmotic laxatives. They're safe to be taken long-term. There's no dependency with these because osmotic just means drawing water into the stool. And so there's not a lot that can go wrong with osmotically drawing water into the stool. We have our stimulant laxatives like senna, which is in Smooth Move tea, which people use when they're traveling on vacation. Occasionally, they need a little bit of an extra boost. And then there's a lot of other stuff that can be really helpful to bring in. But most people are going to get 90% of the way just by dosing magnesium oxide or citrate. A lot of people are already taking magnesium glycinate for sleep, relaxation, and muscle benefits. That helps a little bit with the stool, but it's really the word after the magnesium that's doing the heavy lifting. So glycine isn't going to loosen the stool a lot, but oxide and citrate are going to draw water into the stool. I cannot tell you how many times someone has told me, I think I need to go on an SSRI, or I feel like I'm going crazy, or I feel like my husband's going to want to divorce me, like whatever. They're having really severe symptoms. And it could be as easy as taking something like magnesium and moving that toxic burden out and letting your body function the way it wants to so that you don't have this excess inflammation. Remember, inflammation in our body affects our brain, and our brain is just an organ in our body. So if we're going to have inflammation in our gut, we actually even have a specific gut-brain axis, which will amplify that inflammation in our brain. But even just in general, from it being systemic, we're going to have brain inflammation from that too. So can't give any medical advice. I'm not advocating that you do any of this, but I think it's really fun to do the corn test and see what happens. And I think that gives us a really big starting place. For people who are like grossed out by the idea of your stool, that's common, but honestly, get over it because this is the number one thing you can do to support your health is make sure that you're having healthy transit. And if you don't get this part of your health sorted out, then nothing else is actually going to help. Because if you think about it, there's nothing else that you could do that's going to substitute the role of this waste clearance in moving the toxic burden out of your system. If you take an SSRI, those can be so helpful, but those are just modulating your serotonin. They're not lowering your toxic load. So hopefully this gives some food for thought. Maybe you're constipated and you didn't realize that you were. And maybe you're going to be shocked that you feel like you're not having as many blood sugar swings. You feel like you're sleeping better. You feel like your hormones feel more balanced. You feel like you're not having as many itchy histamine symptoms. You feel less anxiety, less brain fog, less irritability. And hopefully you overall just feel better and feel like your brain is healthier. All right. Thank you everyone for listening. We will catch you next time. Thanks for joining us for another weekly reset. If you loved hanging out with us today, subscribe so you never miss an episode and share this with a friend who could use a little calm and connection too.
This show is for education and inspiration, not medical advice. To learn more or connect with us, check out the show notes below. Until next time, take care of your mind, your body, and your heart.